Welcome everybody to this session. It's hosted both by the LGBTQ and Allies Network and the Multigenerational Network here at NHS Digital. And I'm delighted to have a fantastic group of people on the call today. We've got Richard, Tina and Courtney, and we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so having a chat about the different perspectives that each have had, the new experiences and what it's been like in their community during their lifetime. So without further ado, let's start off with Richard. Richard, tell us something about yourself so we get to know you as a person.
Hi, I'm Richard Berry. I've worked with NHS Pathways within NHS Digital for this is the start of my 8th year. Previous to that, I was regional training manager for 111 in London, and I've worked in health in the call centre environment for about 18 years, but I found the tunnel. I got out of doing shifts and weekends, so I'm really pleased about that. I think I've done my time. Outside of work, this may well interest you. Well, you can see I like music from the picture of David Bowie behind me, but I manage an indie rock band. So they're based in Maidenhead and Reading. 4 young lads who are in their early 20s. They're really good fun. They're really funny. They're lovely. They teach me lots of youth speak and get me to practice words. I've just got them signed to a record label, and we've got a couple of big festivals this year in Somerset and Reading, which we're hoping are going ahead. And so outside of work, it's music. Previous to all this stuff, I used to teach horse riding. I was born and brought up in the New Forest, so I spent many, many years teaching children and adults to ride. Now I just admire horses from a distance, so I don't have to get up at 7:30 in the morning and break ice on the water buckets. So that's me, really.
Thanks, Richard. That's great. And you must tell us later how they get on with their festivals over the summer.
I will, yes, I will do.
Courtney, would you tell us something about yourself? We'd love to hear.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Courtney and I'm a project manager. I've been with NHS Digital for coming up to 3 years now. Outside of work, I recently bought a house, so my life is just consumed with renovations and paint colours and all that sort of stuff. And more recently than that, I bought a puppy. So I have a gorgeous little puppy called Sprout. Who's locked out of the room currently so that she can't just like run in and attack me throughout this. But I love cooking and I love going on long walks with Sprout.
Oh, how lovely. And I'm sure we'd love to see Sprout at some point. Tina, my fellow Scouser, tell me a little about yourself.
Okay, so I'm Tina Davis-Taylor, and like Claire said, I'm a Scouser, and you can't tell from the accent really, can you? I'm 52. I've been married for about 10 years, very happily married, to a fellow NHS person as well. Like Courtney, I love cooking, and I love cooking from scratch, and I love trying to, different combinations and stuff. Been trying HelloFresh lately, which has been really, really good. And I'm also into my sport, do a bit of fitness through the week. Sometimes I could be known to be doing 8 o'clock HIIT sessions on the beach. My colleagues are like, really? And I'm like, yeah. I've played hockey for years now, more years than I can even remember, but also been really deeply involved with the hockey teams. I've been vice chair. I've done lots of different teams and things like that, and I think that some of my work skills help me with some of that, especially about organising teams, etc. But I've been in the NHS for about 18 years. And I love working for the NHS, and I think I choose the NHS as my employer because I feel like I can be me and I can be who I want to be working for the NHS. And a really interesting fact about me is I have got a massive gin collection at home, and it's one of these things that I always show off to people. But I don't actually drink it that much, but I do really, really like it, and I love getting new bottles.
Oh, how wonderful. Well, that's such a lovely set of stories to hear right at the start of the session. And Tina, you said there that you got to be yourself. Being in the NHS was apart from your values of looking after people, it's about being yourself. And I'm really interested to hear, I know language that we use to describe people of different genders and different sexualities has changed over the years. What's your thoughts on those? Have you seen significant change in your lifetime?
Yes, I would say that. And I think that if I think back to when I first came out, and I think for me, there was a lot of, how can I put it, a lot of, I would say, you were put into a box, you were put into sections, you were either this or you were either that, and you were never, you had to be something. You know, you couldn't actually be anything else, and it was just sort of, you know, there was no fluidity. You know, the word gender fluid is around now, you know, and I think that is something that is very much something that our younger generation understand more. But I think that for me, growing up, it was very much that I had to be a certain way. And I think being in the sort of, I would say, in the lesbian culture of things, it was either you were either butch or you were either femme. And I was neither one nor the other. And I've been everything. But actually, I'm just me. I'm me. I'm a woman. I like women, you know, and it's not, I don't know. It has changed. And when we, as an organisation, we started to look at pronouns and things like that, one of the things there was that, you know, I am a she and I am a her, you know, and I'm very, very proud to put that on my signature and things like that. And I'm also happy to correct people when I talk about my other half, and now I talk about my wife, because it's accepted, because I can get married and I am married.
That's absolutely wonderful. Courtney, as a member of the younger generation, that fluidity must have, was it more evident for you?
I think so. I think when I came out when I was, I think, 13, 14 years old, and I came out as bisexual, not even knowing what pansexual was. And when people used to ask me or come up in conversation, I would always say that gender just doesn't really mean anything to me, whether it's in forming a friendship or a intimate relationship or anything. It's just not something that I care about. Which was really interesting, because it was only in later life that I discovered what pansexual means, meaning that you just don't, and that's how I'd always described being bisexual. So it was like a new word that was really what I meant when I was saying bisexual.
Right, I see. So they're not the same thing, pansexual and bisexual, then?
No, so to be bisexuals mean I am attracted to men, I'm attracted to women. Whereas pansexual is just much more how I feel that gender just isn't something that you would consider when you're looking for a partner, and like I say, I think about it more in general life. It's just gender I just don't think matters to me in terms of who a person is and like what they have to offer.
I see. And Richard, was your experience like that, or did you have a different one?
Oh no, because I've been the oldest in the group.
I wasn't going to say it.
No, I'm happy to. I'm 60 and proud of it. Yeah, I've been. When I turned 60, I did a lot of reflecting. Actually, it was interesting, and I think one of the things that we talked about, Claire, was the recent workshop that we attended, and the use of the word queer. So when I was growing up at school, queer, homo, fag, they were all horrible slur words. So with the discussion was now that a lot of younger people have embraced the word queer to embrace the whole community, and I struggle with that. Every time I hear it, I go back to those lads chanting it at school, and I'm working really hard to overcome that. But my experience was completely different. I mean, I never ever came out, but my mum was years ahead of her time. The way she discovered I was gay, we didn't need to come out, was my boyfriend at the time, my first boyfriend, and we were staying at my parents because we were doing riding instructors, and Mum came back from bridge early and we were having a kiss and cuddle on the sofa. She opened the lounge door and she said, "Oh, shall I make a cup of tea?" Mortified, both of us were mortified. But the next morning she just said, "Are you happy? Does he make you happy?" And I said, "Yes." She went, "Well, I'm happy." And that was it. That was my coming out. There was no big drama. But one of the things I realised from talking on to the allies as well quite a lot is that as gay people or trans people, it's not just once, is it? You're coming out all the time. But I could talk for ages on that. So it's I think terminology's changed. Yeah, it's embracing the new words for me, which is a challenge, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way we describe ourselves is very personal to our identity, and words have such depth of not just meaning from the dictionary, but meaning from our own history and our own culture and experiences. Tina, how do you mind talking about your coming out experience?
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, I was going to say, you know, that's something that I've been thinking about prior to this conversation, and thinking about how that is for me, and some of the stories that friends have told me as well, and that my coming out story is, you know, is something that when I think back and I look back at me as a person and growing up as a child, there was no role models, there was no, you know, being gay, you know, being lesbian, being bisexual, what have you. I mean, transgender wasn't even mentioned, you know. God, you know, you're talking you know, a few years ago. Anyway, and I think for me, it was always a case of none of my peers were gay. I didn't know anybody, you know, or we might have ridiculed and laughed at somebody because of the way that they were, because I didn't know any different. And I think that for me, it was when I came out, and I came out to my mum. My mum was very much really, and I was like, yeah, well, you know, Karen, who I've been, you know, I'm sort of, you know, friends with, well, she's more than a friend. And my mum was like, well, what do you mean? It didn't even cross her mind. But you'd been with boys. And I went, Mother, I've been engaged and everything, but it wasn't right, and it wasn't me. And, you know, even down to the fact that when I was 21, my mum, I had a birthday party, and my mum and dad organised balloon dancers for me, you know, male stripping balloon dancers.
Oh.
And I hadn't come out at this point, but I was sort of, I was at that contemplation stage. I was mortified. I was like, oh, but I can still appreciate a good looking man, but they weren't very good looking. Oh no, they were horrendous. Anyway, and they had little Hitler moustaches and everything. It would not be PC now. Anyway, so I came out to my mum, and I said to her, but Mum, I said, you never told me I could be gay. I said, it was always that there was one way, and that was the only way that you could be. You were going to get married, you were going to have 2.4 children, and that was it. And I left home when I was 17 because I just thought, and I'm a bit of a rebel anyway, but I just couldn't live at home. And I couldn't live at home because I just felt really restricted. And I don't know if that was part of me and how I wanted to be a bit more freer with my life. But my mum said to me, don't tell your dad. And I said, why? And she said, oh, no, anyway. I said, well, he's going to find out one day. And my mum always brought us up to be open and honest. And that's what I was trying to be with her. Anyway, I don't know when my dad, or whether my mum told my dad, I don't know. But literally for years and years, even probably until I got married, he still thought it was a phase. And I said, and I think it was after we got married, me and Helen, wife, and we were starting to try for children. And I think he realised then that this is serious. And I don't know if it was the fact that we were trying for children was another. And when I say got married, we had the civil partnership. We've now since converted it to a marriage. But yeah, so it's just, and now, but towards the end, I mean, he died a few years ago, my dad, but towards the end, my dad was very, he loved, you know, he loved me much more, I felt, as I got older, as he did when I was younger. So, but I know there's a lot of friends out there, and I think that for women, it may be different to men sometimes. And I know probably, Richard, you can probably, you know, you've probably got friends whose family have shunned them. I know that there's a few people that I know that families have literally turned their back on them and they do not talk to them whatsoever. And that's whether you come from, it's different cultures as well. So in different cultures, it's a big no-no. You know, it's so there's a whole gambit of things out there. So.
And I think pick up on that point, Tina. I think it's also, again, you know, you say where you grew up. I mean, I grew up on the south coast of England. It was very white, very middle class. I'm just thinking there was one lad of colour in my school, and that was it. So, and I knew nothing of this. We lived in the New Forest. It was very agricultural. It was very rural in parts of it, and I remember my eyes being opened hugely when I went to my grandparent. My mum was from Southampton. When we used to visit my grandparents, I had an Asian family living next door. That was my first exposure to anyone of colour, and she used to, she was they were a lovely couple. They used to sneak me in and give me like snacks, which were really exotic. I thought, wow, these are really amazing. But
was it like mango?
Yeah,
yeah.
No exposure to anything else, and I think it very much. If I hadn't had a mother who was very ahead of her time for the 60s, you know, at school, I'm thinking about boys played football, yuck, rugby, ugh, cricket, ugh, hockey, yes, that was good, cross-country running. Girls did the other things. We couldn't do, you know, I desperately wanted to do cooking because it was a life skill, but I couldn't do it because I had to do woodwork and metalwork. You know, it was like men did this and girls did that, and never the twain should meet. So, yeah, I think it was of a time then, but things have definitely moved forward now.
Yeah, I bet you things were different for you, Courtney, when you went to school. I bet you could do woodwork or metalwork, or well, you probably don't even have that anymore. You know, remember making the money boxes? Everyone made a money box, didn't they? Woodwork. And then I can't remember what we made in metalwork. Was it an ashtray or something? They wouldn't make one of them now. Oh, God,
an ashtray, yeah.
Well, I suppose it's interesting, Courtney, for you, maybe when you went to school, and sorry, I'm taking over your role now, Claire, but when you went to school, Courtney, that you're about that gender difference in some of the subjects, I suppose, did you feel like there was any gender difference?
There was for some, so like we could still do, like, I can't remember, it wasn't called woodwork, it was called something else, but you could do electronics, or I did graphic design. But for PE there was, like, the girls played hockey and the boys played football and rugby. That was still, and we played netball. That was still a thing, which we did it for like a short term, like it was like, oh, girls, try out some rugby, like it's this really exotic thing. But yeah, it was still a little bit like that, but not so much.
Yeah, it's interesting how things have changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't have computers though, did we, Richard?
You had quill and ink, did you?
No, we didn't.
No, I was chalk monitor. Claire, for one term. At like the end of the lesson, the teacher wrote on the board and you had to rub it all off. And those board rubbers, anyway, we're going, I digress. Can you imagine health and safety now, all that chalk dust?
Absolutely, I can imagine. So that tells me that over the years, attitudes have changed, some faster than others in certain cultures or certain groups, and not everyone is as accepting as maybe some people are. Does that affect you in the workplace? I've heard the term microaggressions.
I think I'm really lucky in the training team because I can, like Tina was saying, you know, I think this is probably for me, all the work I've done over the years. I've worked for 40 years, and this is the team where I can be most like myself. I'm going to have to apply a filter because my normal ego state is playful child, and I can be naughty, but I can be myself, and I'm not actually very much different. So you're seeing really the real Richard, just probably slightly toned down a bit, but I can be myself. I can talk about, you know, ex-partners. I can talk about being mentors to some young gay people, which is what I do outside of work, and without any shame or without any comments, because people say, oh, that's not, it's interesting. But if I think back to my formative years, I mean, as I lived through the Thatcher government, the heinous clause 28, when I remember all the books were removed from the libraries and schools about promoting homosexuality. I mean, that was just horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And also I lived through the AIDS crisis. So in the 80s, when we started seeing those horrendous adverts on the television of the tombstone with AIDS, I don't know if you've probably all seen them, but I lived through all of that. I luckily, touched wood, I didn't lose any friends, but I had friends who'd lost friends. So I think that's the AIDS crisis, the way it was handled, and the stigma and taboo, which I think is still hanging around a certain age group, really meant that you couldn't be yourself because people would say, "You've got AIDS." You know, it's one of those. It's one of those slurs. Yeah. Oh, there's one of those. I don't know what language we can use on here, but I'm just gonna. This is there's one of those pufters. I bet he's got AIDS. Don't come near us. Or going swimming and being mindful. I'll never forget being swimming with a partner and trying to make it very obvious that we were young and we were very much in love, but let's split up and we'll go into a different changing cubicle and we won't talk to each other, and being very aware of not drawing attention to the fact that you were gay because of the stigma around the gay disease and that sort of thing. It was horrendous, pretty horrendous.
Gosh, yes, it does sound it. Your generation, Courtney, obviously they grew up in a period where we have, if not a cure, we have drugs that can control and reduce the risk of AIDS, and it becomes something you live with as opposed to something you die from. Was it a big part of your induction into the community, if I can put it that way? That sounds very formal, doesn't it?
Not for me, it wasn't. I suppose it's different for me being a woman as well. Like there's not as much stigma as there is for men. And I also find for me, I'd in some ways escape a lot of the prejudice that the LGBTQ plus community face, because I have been with a man for the past nearly 5 years now. So the vast majority of people just assume that I'm straight. And I think for that reason, I am more involved in the community because I want to support, because I get away with a lot of it. People just don't, it's not something they assume about me, which is why I'm the deputy chair for the LGBTQ plus network, and I'm quite active in the networks and in the community in general, just raising awareness. But yeah, I think I get away with a lot that other people don't.
I think, Courtney, I mirror some of that in terms of in my previous organisation in Liverpool, I was the vice chair for the LGBT network, and I think that when I would say, sometimes I would say to people, and they'd go, "Oh, right," and I'd be, and I think that it's like, it's what people think and it's people's perceptions as well. And where you were saying about microaggressions before, there's certain things that I would say that some people in my community, we do use the word partner a lot. Where I do personally, sometimes I will use the word partner, but then if I'm feeling bold, I'll say wife. But I think more and more, I don't know whether it's because we've been working at home for such a time that on Teams, because then I can just switch off and then it's gone. I'm not in the same room as that person. But we had was it National Coming Out Week a few weeks ago? Was it National Coming Out Week? Oh no, Lesbian Visibility. Sorry, Lesbian Visibility. And I've just joined a new team, and I very bravely said on the call, the first call on this wider Teams meeting, and I just said it. They were talking about something, I don't know, about being Pride Month or something. I said, oh, there's also lesbian visibility, and I'm being visible as a lesbian. And I thought, oh God, Tina. I thought, and then I thought, well, do you know something? What's the worst thing that can happen? And I really don't care. I really, but I think that I'm past some of those things, and I'm happy to challenge. I'm happy to challenge people, but I'm also happy to challenge people in terms of their own language. So if I hear it, if I you know, see it. And I think it's calling people out and saying, actually, and whether that be that they're being dismissive of somebody because of their opinion, and I think sometimes it's about manners. But years ago, I had a manager work for an external company. It was a private company, and I had a manager who was quite, I would say, quite interested in my relationship, but for the wrong reasons. And it really, and in fact, it was something that I actually took to HR because I felt really, really uncomfortable. And a few months later, I miraculously, and this wouldn't happen now because we have a lot more laws and a lot more stuff going on, and I'm a lot more braver than I was then. And he was very dismissive of me. And anyway, I went to HR. A few months later, I was made redundant with a very healthy package, and I could sign something to say I wouldn't take anything any further.
Gosh.
Yes, and that
Wow.
is because he was very, and I think it was more about his word against mine, maybe, I don't know. But it does happen, and I think it still happens. I think we're very sheltered in the NHS, but I think it's also about the fact that there's a lot of training and a lot of information out there that people need to be aware of, and it's not just us as NHS digital workers, it's frontline people as well. It's frontline people understanding it. So it's whether you go into a hospital setting and you're asked about your, you know, your protected characteristics, or, you know, what have you. So, you know, whether you're, you know, LGBT, or whether you're white British, whatever the different things are. And I think that the education part for people is there, definitely. And it's been going on for years. It's been going on. Anyone who's ever worked with any kind of data knows that some of the information hasn't necessarily been there. But I think that if you are a person who's listening to this and you're one of those people who don't understand why we collect this kind of information, it is about services and about improving services for everybody. But it's also about some of the frontline staff understanding that as well.
Right. And that's something that I guess has started to come to the fore with the Equality Act and other legislation, but it takes a culture change as well, doesn't it?
I think so, Claire. You know, one thing I realised, I'd done some reflecting when I was 60. I've got to the point now in my life where I'm thinking, as long as I'm not rude to somebody, the fact that I like men is actually none of your business. And if you've got a problem with it, then you need to look within yourself and think, you know, I used to quote, which I quoted before, which is I had a young, in my previous role, I had a young trainer who I was bringing on, and I heard him as I was walking past the training room talking about me as the training lead, and he said, you know what, you know Richard's gay, but he's a really brilliant trainer and he'll really look after you. Well, we had a robust conversation in the office afterwards about the relevance of my sexuality, and I think as gay and lesbian trans people, often our sexuality, this is a thing that I'd like to go on my gravestone, my sexuality doesn't define me. So, you know, you don't say, oh, you know, Tom's heterosexual, but he's a really good trainer. You just don't hear it. It's as if being gay
No.
is something. I mean, yes, I'm very exotic and I'm very interesting, but you know, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. I think so. That for me, that's changed, and I think it's. I was listening to what you were saying, Tina, about becoming braver and challenging and being out there. And I love hearing people on calls when you say your wife and someone else in the team, you know, says I'm with my wife here, or one of the directors would say, oh, you know, my husband's in the background making a noise, and you would not have heard that. I mean, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have heard that. You'd have heard partner. I use partner quite a lot, but it's so lovely when you hear a same-sex couple saying, this is my husband, this is my wife. And people just don't seem to blink an eye now. I mean, they might do when, it's interesting as well, the point you make now, because we're all virtual, we can't get together, is there might be eye rolling and people have got their camera off. But, you know, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Could I ask Courtney a question, Claire? Is that all right? Being the younger.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about a little while ago about, Tina and I were saying about you were very much put in a box. You're male, you're female, you play football, you do netball, girls wear skirts, boys wear trousers, with your, I mean, I don't have any, I'm not going to ask you how old you are, because you don't ask a lady, I have no idea. But when you were at school or growing up, was there less of that? So if you wanted a girl and you wanted quite short hair, but you weren't necessarily like lesbian or lesbo as they used to call it at school, you know, was it more fluid at school with appearance and attitudes?
People were definitely still judged, like, and they were definitely still, yeah, if you had short hair and you were a girl, you would definitely be called a lesbo. I mean, I was like, so I remember when I came out, like people shouting lesbo at me down the corridor, which thankfully I had like a really great friendship group that would go absolutely balmy at people. Like for me, it was just like, whatever, water off a duck's back, it doesn't matter to me. But they would go mad. They'd go absolutely ballistic and have a go at people that would say anything, which is, to me, I was happy to just let it go. They were not. But yeah, it definitely still happened. There was definitely people that if you looked a bit different, you were the different one. And why you like that? Why do you think this? And yeah, I think that definitely hadn't gone away by the time I was at school. I think to some degree with kids, does stuff like that ever go away?
Well, do you know, I was thinking, because you know this shows how old I am. So I was at school when David Bowie was playing his amazing Ziggy Stardust character. And for those who don't know, Google it. It was an amazing character. And we had a lad at school. He was a little bit out there, and he came to school with his the mullet dyed bright red, and really, I thought he was the coolest thing ever. So because I said to my mum, I said, well, my dad was having none of it, you know. So, but I think the influence for me, and I'm saying tongue in cheek, but someone like Mark Bolan, David Bowie had such an impact on teenagers, because I know for me, I remember there was a very famous, when he was singing his hit Starman, he put his arm around Mick Ronson, his guitarist's shoulders, and sang in the mic. And it was so monumental that someone wearing makeup and wild clothes and things, it was like a door opening. I know for me, I thought it's okay to be different. I've just seen this on television. And I think Bowie had a massive influence on teens growing up, and the music. I mean, we've not really touched on the music side of things, but a lot of very influential out there artists showed a lot of young people that it's okay to be different. Certainly in the 70s were very drab, grey times. We had the miners' strikes, we had the power cuts, we had the union problems. So it was a very grey, I mean, if you think I'm right, Tina, but 70s were very grey and dull politically. I mean, there was a lot of unrest, but music and theatre and art was one of the ways you could escape. And I think that yeah, it was an interesting time to know that you could be otherworldly or something else than what you were told you had to be.
Yeah, because I touched on some of that before, and I was saying, you know, that I said to my mum, you know, you never told me I could be gay. You know, you never told me. And my mum sort of looked at me as if to say, you know, well, I brought you up how I've brought you up, and you know, and actually, was it my mum who should have said, you know, but actually it wasn't even in my mum's world. You know, it really wasn't.
No, we didn't. I remember that the sex ed or PHSE or something out of school, nothing was ever mentioned about same-sex relationships. Nothing. I mean, and if it was mentioned, it was derogatory, and it was those sort of people are ill, or you know. So that, and growing up, you know, you think about children growing up on as a sponge and soaking in all that stuff. When I knew I was gay when I was 8, I didn't have the words. I couldn't have explained it, but I knew that that's what I was.
Yeah.
And that I much more enjoyed the company of the boys at school. And I can remember one of the boys going on about, oh, do you want to come down, Bez, do you want to come and kick a football round? And the girls said, do you want to come and make daisy chains? Well, I went and made daisy chains. That was much more fun. So, but there was no.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me,
No, go on.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't sort of. I don't know. It was like, I think for me, I wish I'd always known. I really wish, you know, you were saying you'd known from an early age, and Courtney had known from an early age, and I think for me, I was sort of, I was on that point of, I don't know, I went down the route of what my peers, it was that peer pressure of, you know, and it was like, well, yeah, but I always felt there was something missing from my life. And I always wondered why I looked at girls in a different way. Now I know why. But I think it was just trying to make sense of it all and navigate the world as well. And navigate the world in which there wasn't, I didn't feel like there was a spot for me. I didn't feel like there was a place.
Do you know,
Which
one of the
started.
things, what you were talking, what's occurred to me is when I was growing up and watching television, there were no role models that I wanted to follow. So for gay men on television, you had Larry Grayson, you had very
John Inman.
John Inman, yeah.
John Inman.
Larry Grayson,
Yeah.
John Inman, very camp, very over the top. There was the Quentin Crisp debacle. There was the story of Jeremy Thorpe and his male lover. So all the media portrayal of gay men was either toxic or I thought, yes, I'm attracted to other lads, but I don't want to mince and wear a handbag. And there was no reference as a teenager. How can I be?
Yeah.
Was it any better for you, Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Oh.
Courtney, you've probably got more than we have. I think I had Brookside, and then was it Zoe off Emmerdale? That was it. But I suppose, have you got role models, Courtney, that you've seen?
I think there definitely are more, and especially like the younger generations now, like they've got so many role models, like and especially with social media and everything being at everyone's fingertips, like you can't not find someone that looks like you if you look hard enough, I feel. But I'd never had anyone like family or friends that were gay or anything like that. So I think to some degree, I didn't think that there were many people. Like there wasn't anyone like in my close circle, or there wasn't anyone at school that I was like, oh, well, they're the same as me, that sort of thing.
Did you find them through social media, or how did you get into the community and make contact with people like you?
I think, yeah, just through like social media and finding groups online, and Tumblr was a big thing when I was young, and everyone had a Tumblr page, and it's all the algorithms, isn't it, of if you like enough things, then it's going to send you down that way, and you're all of a sudden on lesbian Tumblr. It was honestly, that was what it was like, and people would talk to each other, and you'd just find friends and speak to people that way, and you'd find then friends that lived near you, and that's sort of how I met people. But it was very much outside of my immediate like school network. Like all of my friends at school were straight, and then I sort of had this like, in a way, like a hidden life, and it was like that for a while because I knew that I was not straight from probably being about 5. Not that, like you say, Richard, you don't know what the word is, and you don't know what, it's not romantic or anything like that, but you know that you don't fit the standard that everyone seems to be portraying, and you see it everywhere. So yeah, for a while I sort of had it as like a little hidden version of myself.
And I suppose that algorithm that, you know, the more you like particular pages, the more it shows you the same kind of stuff. Doesn't that perhaps deepen the divisions that there sometimes are between different parts of the LGBTQ community?
I think it can do, but it's weird because, like you say, it shows you the same thing that you're interested in. So sometimes it can feel very much like everyone's super accepting, like everyone thinks the same as me because that's all you see.
Yeah.
And like if you've got that sort of close group of friends, like I'm really lucky now that all my friends are amazing. They're like super accepting of anyone and anything you want to be. But there obviously are people out there that aren't, and I think sometimes it can be shocking when you hear about things happening and situations that happen because you are sort of cocooned in a way.
Yeah. I grew up with a faith. So I had a faith, and I would go to church, and I would but I felt when I came out that wasn't accepted, that it was, and I think, I don't know, it wasn't, I was a Church of England, and so you know, the sort of the guilt and the confessional stuff wasn't there, you know, that's the same as with the Catholic faith, but there was still that what was right and what was wrong. And I think it's only really, it's I don't know, I've probably been to church just a handful of times, over the last probably 10 years. And I think that attitudes have changed there in terms of religion. And I think that when the equality around marriage came out, I think that changed as well. So, and I think that there is still some sectors in our society. So I know that, excuse me, if certain people knock on the door, so different faiths knock on your door, and I'm not going to name them, but sometimes it's very much, if I said, that I was a lesbian and that, hang on a minute, I'll just get my wife, I'd be, it's not accepted. And I think for me, that's one of the big things that as a child growing up, we would go to church every Sunday. That was, and we were involved in the church and everything else. And I just felt like I couldn't do that. I probably feel like I could do now, but I don't think I can get up on a Sunday morning the same way as I used to. So maybe I worship from afar. So yeah, I don't know if that's affected you, Courtney, or you, Richard, but that's just my personal experience in my experience of different sectors and not really being accepted or feeling like I'm not accepted. I'd probably be fine now, but I just can't get up on a Sunday anymore.
Well, I remember conversation, just different sectors. I can remember a conversation with a GP previous to my thing who talked about, I went for something and a discussion about a partner came up and we discussed whether I like men or women, and he was like, "Oh, okay then," and he just moved on. Whereas a previous one, I was asked as a teenager by a healthcare professional, "Is it a phase?" No. Is it phasing? Well, it's been a phase for quite a long time. So I think you're right. I mean, but I think that ties in what I was saying, Tina, about coming out. So you were saying that you make a choice as to how open you're going to be with people who come to your door around their faith, and whether you say, "This is my partner, this is my wife, I'm a lesbian," whatever. And I think that's something that we always make. We always have, and it's a bit like when you're going out and about. I mean, something that fascinates me, Courtney, with the younger generation is, are people less concerned about holding their hands with a same-sex partner in town than in my generation? It simply would not happen unless possibly you went up to Soho in London, and that was probably it. I mean, you wouldn't walk around Barton-on-Sea where I was brought up. I mean, I remember walking around in the early 70s, I would have been 12-ish, and seeing a person of colour, and everybody was staring because you didn't see people of colour in that part of the world. So if I'd been mincing down with my Larry Grayson handbag, holding my boyfriend's hand, I would have been lynched. But I wondered now what it's like for you, Courtney, whether or not people are more accepting of that private gesture.
I think it is, and I think people are a lot more confident. Like, it was interesting what you were saying, Tina, about saying you use the word partner and it's almost to like avoid the conversation. That for me, I say partner even though I'm with a man at the minute, because I don't want people to assume that about me. And it's because being pansexual is a part of my identity. I feel very connected to the community, and for me, like, I would describe myself as gay. Like, I know that for some people that's not appropriate, and some people would say, I know some gay men would be like, "Well, you're not gay." Not that they all would, but I know some people might have an issue with me using that word. But to me, it just is a part of my identity. And I think the younger generations are a lot more confident and a lot more loud about it, because it is more accepted, and they feel like they have a right to not hide, which they do. But there's not that fear there as much, I don't think.
Courtney, that's really interesting. You say that some gay men would say you can't use the term gay to describe yourself. Does that mean that there are actually fracture lines or conflicts between different parts of the community?
Oh, definitely. There are definitely divisions between the LGBTQ plus community. Like, I've been quite lucky, and a lot of the people that I speak to, I've had more sort of biphobia, panphobia from straight people than I have from the community. But I know other people that haven't had that and have had it where they've had lesbian women that have said they wouldn't go out with them because they're not gay enough, and all that sort of. There is there is a lot of stigma around bisexuality and pansexuality, about it being, even having people of the community say that it's a phase and you'll choose one way or the other and that sort of thing. But that, thankfully, I have been very lucky. And like I say, I've only really had that from heterosexual people, but I have had friends that have told me stories like that.
Well, I think about the fractures, Claire, was like when I think I realised that sort of, you know, the vile attacks and the problems that the trans community are having now, like they're 50 years behind the Stonewall riots, and now the media focus, and also very sadly within the gay LGBT community, the turn is, let's take it out on the poor trans people. But you know what, I spend a lot of time talking to trans people, mainly on the internet, and I have such a laugh. But it's interesting to say, thank you for reminding me, Courtney, about the algorithms. So I was thinking, why am I on trans TikTok? Because I'm not trans, it's not a problem.
Really?
But I think it's because of the algorithms. But you know what, the struggles that they have, and I was speaking to one young guy, he must have been in his 20s, mid-20s, who was contemplating suicide because of the harassment he was getting, and we had an in-depth conversation. I'm not going to repeat any of it, but you know, it's just that this poor lad was trying to be himself, and one of the phrases that still stick in my head is, why are people bullying me when I'm working so hard to make the outside match what I feel on the inside? And I thought, whoa, because I don't have that struggle. And yes, I'm gay, yes, I'm out there, but I don't have that I'm working really hard. I mean, I'd like to be 6'2" and blonde, but that's never going to happen. But you know, I don't have to work on my appearance because I'm cisgender. So it's just like, and I think this the whole movement is horrendous.
I think you were saying about transgender or transgender. Well, I didn't say, I don't mean colleagues, but parts of our community have. There's a definite divide in the lesbian community. I know that, and I've seen that, and I have literally, you know, pulled people aside and said, you know, you can't say that, and it's about, you know, transgender women are women, you know, they are women, and there's a whole discussion about that and about women only spaces and things like that, and it gets right up my nose, and it really annoys me.
Yeah, that's because people still haven't got their head around that gender is a social construct, and gender and sexuality completely different. And I wrote some learning resources for the 111 and 909 frontline staff explaining about gender dysphoria and how you deal with a transgender patient, and you know, and looking at, so for someone who admits they're transgender or says I'm transgender is ringing with toothache, they've got toothache. But you know, if they've got abdominal pain, then it's going to be more complex because you don't know where they are on their transition or if they're transitioning or whatever. But yeah, come on, gay community.
I know.
Support the trans people.
Yeah, but like you said, it's in terms of community wise, you know, they're way behind where maybe we were, you know, 20 years ago. You know, I mean, I didn't know anyone really who was transgender probably till, I don't know, I was maybe 30, you know, and it was something that, you know, people who were transgender, they would go out into the gay community, but they'd hide, and they'd have like, I don't know, we had like Merseyside Friend, and there was a group, but it was that fine line between transgender and transsexual, and it was like, you can't be one and be the, you're either one or you're the other, you know. But and it was, but now it's just so much more, you know, and Pride does that as well. You know, this month is Pride, you know, with June's Pride month, you know, she says with a wristband, you know, and the other day I had me beads on, you know, and stuff, and I was going to wear me ears, you know, remember our listening ears, Richard, you know, rainbow ears today, and I forgot. Menopause anyway. So I think that, you know, we've got there's so much more out there about pride, about being proud of who you are. And I think that, you know, it sounds like to me, like me, Courtney and Richard, and probably you as well, are very clear, very proud of who we are. And I think that, you know, it's very apt that we're talking about things that we're talking about now in Pride Month.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with the, don't say too much about it, but there's 3 young people I mentor outside of work who might identify within the community, and actually to be able to be a good role model and say you have nothing to be ashamed about, you have nothing to hide, be who you are. And it doesn't matter if one week you like boys, one week you like girls, one week you like unicorns, it really doesn't matter.
No.
And that's the message I'd like to probably leave on, really, to be honest.
Well, then that sounds like a great place to draw this to a close. Thank you, all 3 of you, Courtney, Richard, Tina, for sharing your experiences and your stories, and for speaking out on some really delicate subjects, and thank you for your honesty and vulnerability. Everybody who watches this video, I'm sure, will be so much more enlightened, and I hope hopeful by the end of this. So
thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Been great to have you. Now, if anybody's interested, we also have uncomfortable conversations on a regular basis here at NHS Digital. So do check out our previous videos. Thanks for your time.